So, hi everyone. I'm Reiko. I'm one of the AAC SLPs in the North Vancouver School District. I've been talking about descriptive teaching with some of my co-workers all over the place. And so we have booked this as a Pro D for one of my schools, and they've agreed to let me record it. So hopefully I answer your questions. If you know me, you might know these things already. So I have an Instagram, I have a YouTube channel, I have a blog. I don't really blog on the blog. What it is it's we have like an events page on there, but we also have a troubleshooting page. So I know that at your school, one of our friends broke his talker. And so there's instructions for what to do if that happens on the troubleshooting tab of that blog. So if you want to QR code, this little QR code that's here for you, that will take you there. The new thing on this page here, though, is that I have a website. It's www.reikoaacslp.com. If you send me a question, ask me for a resource, I'm going to put it up on the website and then send you the link. I'm just trying to make my stuff more easily accessible to people. So that's what that is. Feel free to share any of that information. You should also have in your school one of these, and I would say print this off, put it everywhere. I'm pretty sure that at your school you already have these, but if you don't have this sheet, let me know and I can send it to you. We have links to all of our important things, but also the most important thing on this page is the troubleshooting QR code. So that'll take you to that troubleshooting page on our blog, and it'll give you instructions of what to do if somebody cracks their screen or anything like that. So we're here today to talk about AAC users, but I do want to acknowledge that, like, at the root of everything, AAC users have language impairments. And so there might be kids in your school that have language impairments but aren't AAC users, and it's totally okay to use these strategies for those students as well. So just going to put that out there. But just broadly speaking, this isn't going to apply to every single AAC user, but broadly speaking, students with language impairments have imprecise language. Sometimes they lack the vocabulary to get really specific. Sometimes there's greater difficulty with core vocabulary than fringe vocabulary. We'll talk about that in a second, but essentially, like, a lot of the kids I work with have a large knowledge of nouns, right? We know Spider-Man and the Hulk, but then we don't know the verbs to go along with them, like and need and fly and that kind of stuff. Kids with language impairments have a difficulty explaining. They might be able to get a couple words out, but not be able to put a whole bunch of sentences to make something coherent. They have difficulty talking about past events. There might be shorter sentence length. There might also be difficulty using sentences with because or and sometimes there's also difficulties with referencing. And what I mean by that is they might start a story sort of like in the middle, or an explanation or a sentence in the middle, without sort of indicating that it was me or he or she that is the subject of what I'm talking about. So you might be like, okay, so you said something about a robot, but like, what are we talking about? Is this something that happened? Is this a show that you watched? There's a little bit of like lack of vocabulary, lack of language, but also a lack of sometimes the ability to sort of know what I know what you know, and fill in the gaps. These are really, really broad generalizations. Not everything will fit, but maybe a lot of these things fit. So when we think about AAC, we're talking about a lot of skills that come into play, right? So we're going to be talking about fringe vocabulary. We're going to be talking about core vocabulary. But today, I know that you wanted to talk about curriculum. And so that I would put in the new vocabulary box. We're also talking about a bunch of different kinds of competence. So we have language competence, right, which is going to come into play today, and strategic competence, which is going to come into play today. Now, the other thing that I often talk about with teens is curriculum as being sort of like the opposite of life skills. But I just want to say that the great Shelley Moore said, often what we see as life skills is actually 50s housewife skills, right? They're like cleaning, folding towels, like that kind of stuff. That's 50s housewife skills. And what I want to challenge you with today is the truth life skills: reading, language, numeracy. Those are the real life skills. Those are the real things that are important. And so what we're going to do is use curriculum and those life skills together to create a program that's really full of learning for our student all day long. Okay, with breaks, of course, and fun. So when we think about this, okay, normally I would have you participate, but I won't put somebody on the spot like that. So I look at this hot dog page, and let's say I like hot dogs, and I like my hot dogs with a little bit of chili, right? So on my communication board, it's going to be really important for me to have hot dog and chili, right? I kind of don't care about this stuff. I might really need mayonnaise on there because I think mayonnaise is gross. So I might need the ability to say no mayo, right? But the thing that's really important here is hot dog and chili. And so that's great. Now, say I'm at a Whitecaps game, right? Say I'm out with my family and we're watching the soccer game. I almost said hockey. I know it's not hockey. We're watching the soccer game. And this is the only communication board I have. I'm not going to be able to say anything about the game, right? So what we've landed on here is the difference between core vocabulary and fringe vocabulary. So fringe vocabulary is like chili, right? So it's the stuff that's really important for me to customize because it's important to me so that I can get my stuff the way I want it, right? I can talk about the stuff I want to talk about. So I might need Sea Cove if I go to Sea Cove. I might need banana if that's my favorite food. I might need Zuma if I love Paw Patrol, right? But I might not need all these other words because they're not necessarily stuff I want to talk about. There's also core vocabulary. So here's a statistic. Let's see if I can say this right. 80% of what I say as a speaking person, 80% of what I say is the same 250 core vocabulary words. There are 171,000 words in the English language. So when you think about it, those 250 core vocabulary words, those high frequency words, those are going to be the most important, right? So those are words like go, lots of them are here, more, on, help, like, want. These are the words that are on the homepage of a student's AAC system, right? And when we think about life skills language, these are the words that are going to take me from different scenario to different scenario. Like I'm going to be able to use this at the hockey game, but I'm also going to be able to use this during foods class in high school or in the gym while I'm playing soccer or all those different kinds of contexts, right? So this is the stuff that we often need to work on. Number one, because it's high frequency. And number two, because this is an area of weakness for a lot of kids with language impairments. So this is where I often focus like the instructional stuff. I feel like kids figure out where all the fringe vocabulary is, like even if you didn't want them to, they would figure it out, right? But this core vocabulary is the stuff that they really need help with. Now, we also have new vocabulary, right? And new vocabulary happens sort of naturally all the time. We have slang that happens, like boomer. We have singers like Chapel Roan, who might not be in my talker, but I heard a song the other day and I loved it. And I want to tell you that I want you to put her in my talker. We might have new activities that we're exposed to, new movies, new food, new restaurants, all these new things. And I want to be able to tell you about it, but the exact word, nobody has thought to put that exact word in my talker. I had a student that I was working with who suddenly discovered pierogies. So his family wanted me to put pierogies in his device, right? But he needed a way to tell the family that he wanted pierogies in there. Dad was there. He saw the thing happen, right? He was like, he saw the light in his eyes when he tried that pierogi and he's like, that needs to be in your talker. But like, what if dad wasn't there to see that, right? What if that happened at school or something? And the kid came home. Like, I know my daughter has tried new foods at school and come home and been like, can we have this one day? And I'm like, yes, that's great. You have a new food. So it's that ability to talk about these new concepts when you don't have that exact word. And this happens to us all the time, right? Like every once in a while, I can't think of a word. And you're having a conversation and you're like, that thing at the PNE, it goes like up and down. And you go in they have those cars and it's like a train, but it's not. And somebody might go, you mean a roller coaster? And I'm like, yeah, that's the one. But I just couldn't think of the word. It's exactly like that. What we're doing is taking other words to explain the specific word we're trying to think of, right? And that we're talking about descriptive teaching today, and that's all it is. Curriculum is another place where there's new vocabulary. It used to be that we would do what's called chase vocabulary. So say a school was doing a unit and you decided, say it's Egypt, and we decide, okay, we're going to program all the Egypt vocabulary in the talker. But the thing is that, like, depending on the teacher, there may have been notice that Egypt was happening. It may just be that you show up to class one day and Egypt has already been happening for a week and you were just not on with that student during the discussion, right? And then it may take you like a week to figure out what words you need, and then it takes you another week to actually find the time to put them all in. And you need words like sphinx and pyramid and that kind of stuff. And then the unit's over. And then you went through all this work. The kid at the end of the day didn't actually care about Egypt. So you've made this Egypt page, but it was never looked at again. And then the student ends up with all these like random, really specific units in their talker that they're never actually looking at. So it's a lot of work when there's another way, which I will tell you about. What is descriptive teaching? We're going to take high frequency vocabulary to talk about low frequency concepts. Okay, so you and I know that some words are more high frequency than others. What I mean is they're more like core vocabulary. They're more like everyday words. They're not fancy words. So we might, I'm just trying to think of a good example. So we might have car. Car is like a good core-ish high frequency word. Vehicle is a kind of more fancy word for that, right? So vehicle, I would say, I would put vehicle in the low frequency vocabulary. When you think about kids' acquisition of language, we would expect to see them figuring out the word car before vehicle, because car just happens in conversation more frequently. So hopefully this is making sense. So why is this important? So it's strategic, right? Like we need to teach kids how to use the vocabulary that they have, which is probably going to be more high frequency, to talk about new vocabulary, right? It gives them a way to tell people things when they don't have the specific word in their talker. That is, when we think about life skills, this is an ongoing skill that AAC users need. In order to be a truly independent AAC user, you need to talk about anything, anywhere, with anyone. That's kind of like the gold standard. And in order to do that, you need to be able to spell. But before we're spelling, we are relying on other people to predict what I need in my talker, right? Hopefully, as kids kind of go along in their AAC journey, they can start telling you, put this in my talker, right? But it still takes somebody else to put that in there usually. So this is really a huge life skill. Descriptive teaching also reinforces core vocabulary, which we've already said is an area of deficit for a lot of kiddos. And there's no additional need for programming. If you have half an hour, I want you to spend that half an hour reading a book with a kid, doing an activity with the kid, modeling language, doing anything like that. I don't want you to spend that half an hour adding pyramid and sphinx, right? Especially if this is not an area of interest for the student. There have been times where we do a unit and we're like, we had no idea, but this kid loves birds. Program a bird page. That's great, right? Like if they end up being really interested in it, there's no reason to not do that. But like we might also talk about birds and then also not be particularly interested. But that's all of us. We all learn things in school that we have never talked about again. Sorry, teachers. Okay, so let's take a look at what this looks like. So this is how I went to school, right? I think a lot of you will remember this. So when somebody says, what is the hottest planet in our solar system? We answer Venus, right? A descriptive teaching way to do this might be, tell me what you know about Venus, right? So we're kind of turning the question on around so that they don't need the word Venus in their talker in order to participate in this assessment. So they might say, it is hot, circle, round. This implies also that it needs to be grammatically correct. But I think in descriptive teaching, if we can ram words together and they're not grammatically correct, that is totally fine. So if somebody said round hot, I would say that is what we were talking about when it comes to Venus. And so I remember at some point, like people would say, well, don't teach to the test, right? But in this situation, we want to teach to the test. In descriptive teaching, we'll look at a couple of specific examples, but what I like to do is sort of come up with some questions, make some learning supports around this, and then teach, right? This is Venus, it is hot, it is a circle, it is round, right? And then sort of like ask the question, tell me what you know about Venus, see what comes out, right? It's better to start with a few sort of learning objectives and kind of expand from there. Let's look at a couple more examples. So it used to be that we would say, what animals live in Africa? And we might say elephants, rhino, lion, rhinoceros, whatever. But if we twist that on its head, we're going to say, describe an elephant. And somebody might say, it's big, it's gray, it drinks water. I don't know that like the fact that the elephant lives in Africa is the most important part of an elephant. Also, they also live in Asia, but you know, like I don't know if that's the most important part of an elephant conceptually. I think there's so many more interesting things about the elephant. What do bears do in the winter? Hibernate. But we could say, what is another word for hibernate? Tell me what you know about hibernation. Sleep, right? Sleep is a much higher frequency word for hibernate. So how do we do this? This is an example of that I'm taking from an actual student that I used to work with. You'll see like a chicken scratch thing that I drew with his LST, and like that actually happened the day of. Okay, so first things first, we need to identify the learning goal. If you have teachers in the classroom, they already know this, but we went into the BC curriculum to look up government as a topic, right? The class is talking about government. There were 3 big ideas, and we looked at these and we said that this third one made the most sense to this particular student. Individuals have rights and responsibilities as global citizens. So then we broke it down to his sort of comprehension level. I've included a couple vocabulary lists here, and if people are interested, I can send these out as slides later on. Just email me and I can send these to you. But this is, they did like a study on what the top 40 core vocabulary words are. This is it for AAC users, right? So these are the top 40 core vocabulary words. Now, if you're working with somebody who might be not an AAC user, but have any sort of other language thing going on, like ELL, possibly also attention, like that kind of stuff, we might already have a good grasp of these 40 words. So I've also made you this, which is 100 frequently used core vocabulary words. And I would want to make sure that they have a grasp of this sort of introductory sort of vocabulary that's very, very high frequency. But these are the words that we'll be looking at as we go forward. Okay, so this is the thing that I drew with that team. So we said, okay, government. The big idea is individuals have rights and responsibilities. So individuals, that's a low frequency word. A high frequency word that translates that is person, right? This particular student was sort of at a 1 to 2 word sentences sort of place. So we're not talking about a student that can make big, long, giant sentences, right? So we were also talking about how there's a head of government. So we were talking about that being either the teacher or the parent, right? We were talking about the difference between a person and people. So if there's one person versus lots of people, this student was not producing plurals in their language. So we were not sure if they knew the difference between one and many. So that's like a numeracy concept, right? But it's kind of like part of this overall goal. So then individuals have rights and responsibilities. So rights are things they can do, and responsibilities are things they need to do. So then things they can do is play or read. Things they need to do is help do chores, help the teacher, help their parent. So then we made it a little cheat sheet. So the head referred to the teacher or the parent in the classroom, right? And individual meant person. Right was things I can do, responsibilities, things I need to do. And you should notice that all the things on the right-hand side are core vocabulary or core-ish vocabulary, right? When we think about somebody with an AAC system, I don't know if the word individual is in there. The word head might be probably in there under body parts, but definitely not as like a head of an agency, sort of like that kind of concept, right? So what we did was reinforce the concepts across everything, actually. So he had chores at home and school. We modeled that language throughout the day. He got rewards. We used first, then kind of language to model that. So first, you need to do something. You need to do a chore, right? And then you can do something. You can read, you can play a game, up to you. What do you want to do? And that kind of stuff. And then we also talked about groups like class and family. I hope this is making sense. So we really worked to sort of relate that government concept back to his life in order for it to make sense to him. So we're going to do a couple more examples. Now, Mr. Jeffrey has sent us a couple themes that are going to be happening in his classroom. Thanks, Mr. Jeffrey. So you sent us this. And when I looked at this, I was like, oh, needs and wants of individuals and groups. I mean, I say just like use what we just talked about for that. But I want to talk about one social thing and one science thing, okay? So we're going to talk about ways in which individuals and families differ and are the same. And we're also going to talk about basic needs of plants and animals. Okay. So Mr. Jeffrey has 2 AAC users in his classroom. One is, I'm going to call him an emergent communicator. So he's just beginning to learn about communication. He's learning his first words. He literally just got his new AAC system. He's communicating using things like gestures and facial expressions and vocalizations, but he doesn't have a big vocabulary, right? The big vocabulary yet. I don't think that he's able to answer questions, right? So if I said, tell me about this, that's kind of not in his skill set yet. And I think one big question is, how can I show what I know for this little guy? Ways in which individuals and family differ and are the same. When we think about sort of like the core vocabulary concepts in here, like, does he understand different and same? I don't know. I would start with same. Sometimes if I don't understand same, then different is even more abstract, right? Does he understand I or me versus you? Some core-ish vocabularies, because we are talking about individuals and families, is mom, dad, family, person, brother, sister, all that kind of vocabulary. I'm wondering if this student can match or sort or do any of those kinds of tasks. We might be able to start with doing some sort of like, it doesn't have to even be people, right? Like it can be things like food and like doing some sort of like matching game where you have like little cards and you match them. This is the one I had. All my good ones are out right now, but I wouldn't start with this many pictures, maybe like 4 or 6 pictures or something like that, just to start some matching. I have a bunch here if you want to borrow them as well. They never come back, so they're running low. I'm also wondering, I know that this particular student doesn't have siblings, so can they count to 3? Like, is that within their skill set, right? Because this could also be a numeracy piece. So 1, 2, 3. Do I know the difference between 1 and more? A nice learning resource for the student might be like a My Family book with just like 1 or 2 pages on each, 1 or 2 words on each page. So you might have one page that says his name, and then another page that says mom, another page that says dad, right? And then another page that says family. And that might be sort of a nice way to start. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I think that for students like this emergent communicator, we really need to sort of focus on those like basic concepts. Same, different, one, many, right? And those concepts, maybe not many, it might be one versus more, right? But those concepts should definitely be in their talker. So Mr. Jeffrey has a very busy classroom. He has a second AAC user in his class. I believe this is the second year that you've had 2 AAC users in your class. So this AAC user, I'm going to call her context dependent. So what that means is that she can talk about a few things with a few people. Like, I'm not going to say she can talk about everything with everyone, right? We said that that's the hallmark of a really independent AAC user, the ability to talk about anything with anyone, anywhere. That's not this student. She has had her AAC system for a little while, but she's limited in terms of the topics she can communicate about. She's limited in terms of the partners that she's able to communicate with. She might be able to answer multiple choice questions. And that's kind of where I would go with this student. Now, this particular student is able to type and spell quite well, but I think that the comprehension of what she is typing, I think it's a little bit mixed. So I wouldn't ask her to type an answer. Like, I wouldn't ask her a question and expect her to type the answer, because if she was wrong, I wouldn't know why she was wrong, right? Like, if she's wrong, is it because she didn't know how to spell it? She didn't know your question, right? Like, there's so many things that can go wrong here. Whereas with multiple choice, I totally think that this student would be able to do something like that. And the nice thing with multiple choice is that it kind of it's a legitimate like differentiation strategy, and it might actually be helpful to a lot of your students, not just this AAC user. So once you have things done in multiple choice, then they can definitely, like, lots of students in your class will be able to use it. So it's totally worth the time to do this. There's also going to be, just acknowledge that there's hard multiple choice questions and easy multiple choice questions, right? And so just to teach the concept of multiple choice, you might want to make some easy multiple choice questions. So let's talk about what that means. So ways in which individuals and families differ and are the same for the context-dependent communicator, again, focusing on multiple choice. The question might be, what is an individual? Or what is a person? And maybe the answer is, I am. And so if that's the answer you're expecting, we need to be teaching, I am a person, right? What is a family? Maybe we have a picture of their family. Again, making things relevant to them makes it easier to learn, right? And then we're talking really broadly about ways in which individuals and families differ. But I think just to make it more accessible, choosing a person to compare yourself to and talk about what's the same and what's different between the two people is going to make this a little bit more accessible. And if this is something that the student enjoys, and if this is something that was a really good learning experience for them, there's nothing to be said that we can't talk about more and more individuals to compare to, right? So we might choose an EA, a teacher, a peer. Sometimes kids are really into like a particular show. And so maybe we want to compare to like their favorite character. Like if they're into Peppa Pig, we could compare with Peppa Pig and be like, well, she's a pig and I'm a human. First of all, she is pink. I am not. She has a brother named George. I do not. My brother's name is Phil, actually. And so we can talk about what's the same and what's different. you can come up with a little cheat sheet of some sort of like phrases that you're trying to teach, or you can make a little book, whatever it is that you're going to do. Oh, actually, I didn't mention this. For both of these kids, having like a one pager or a little book about them and their family, and then like maybe they trade books and look at each other's families, right? Like that might also be something that is useful for their learning about this concept. Okay, so Mr. Jeffrey's other example was basic needs of plants and animals. Now, for an emergent communicator, this is a big topic, right? And sometimes we just need to pull apart the nuggets. So again, I think that some core vocabulary here is same and different. We need to know what sort of like plants, what are plants, what are animals before we need to get into the basic needs of them, right? I noticed a lot of stuff, a lot of units around plants and animals. So it looks like it's going to be going on for a while in your classroom. Some of the things were like indigenous uses and that kind of stuff. And I think the thing that we need to know at the core of this all is what is a plant and what is an animal. Okay. And so we might talk about how things are the same and things are different. So again, we talked about matching before, and if matching is possible, we might have like one thing of plants and then another thing of animals. And then we could even be like, we can even have both of them out after a while, right? So we have one matching game that's all plants, one matching game that's all animals. And then sort of, hold on, this is a lot of stuff to hold. I feel like an EA juggling all the things. Okay. And then I say, okay, banana. And I try to see, does the student go directly to this page or do they go directly to this page? If they go directly to this page, then I know that they're sort of categorizing, right? And then we could go to like having two boxes, one with like, so it's not matching, it's sorting. So then we could have one box with plants and one box with animals and do the sorting there. I wouldn't necessarily pick food as plants. This is just the one I had. So, you know, you could, I think that like when we think of plants, we might think of something that's like leafy, bush, tree, like that kind of stuff. And then start working on that with sorting. Now, if that's a little challenging and you're not seeing a lot of success, you could pare that back even more and start with just sorting colors, right? Like teaching the task first before we even get to the like plants and animals. Start sorting with colors. And as we do walks around the community, that kind of stuff, we could say, that's a tree, that's a plant, that's a dog, that's an animal, and even just start modeling that language, again, using the talker. I'm 99% sure that you will have words like plant or tree even, and animal in your talker. Okay. Yeah, so core-ish vocabulary, plant, animal, person. Remember that people are animals too, right? So when we talk about basic needs, like this is a little bit cause and effect, and I don't know what his comprehension of this is, but it'll be interesting to start probing this, right? So we need food to keep us healthy. I think bringing it back to basic needs of people, right? I think that often by kindergarten, most of the kids know, like, I need food to be healthy. But maybe our friend here doesn't know that. So maybe we just need to start with food keeps us healthy. And then we can talk about what keeps plants healthy, what keeps animals healthy, right? What is food for plants? What is food for animals? And sort of expand from there. But we might need to take a step back. We might need to take a step way back and just talk about basic needs first. We're kind of like teasing out some sort of emerging language, sort of basic concepts for the student, right? And again, if you do this and you're like, we finished this in a day, then maybe we need to step it up the next week, right? And then for the context dependent communicator, I would say go with multiple choice, right? Show me a plant. And then you can talk about what does a plant need? What does an animal need? I think that you might want to go back and do this sort of work with that student, like basic needs of people, sort of like what keeps us healthy, like that kind of stuff, just to make sure that that's there. But then very quickly go on to what do plants need and what do animals need. And again, you're sort of reinforcing the language throughout the day. I hope that this has made sense. If you want to talk more specific examples when I come to your school, I'm always happy to do that. I hope this session gave you the information as promised. Email me if you have any questions or if you want to chat about anything.